Hello? Oh, yeah, okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks to Ivan for inviting me. And to Mike, thanks to the AA for running this week. I'm going to try and fit an enormous amount of stuff into 45 minutes. It's a very big and complex topic. So I hope I can do it some justice. I'm here with my Ibuki hat on. Ibuki is Earth Building UK and Ireland. It's our national earth building body. It's a charity, and we have connections to a whole lot of European organisms that are all to do with earth building, and we have connections to Proterra in South America, and there are earth building connections that have really sort of grown stronger and stronger in the last. I mean, the French really started this thing off in the late 70s, and little by little the rest of the world is catching up with the French, which is, so that's pretty much how it's always been. Huh? And so one of the things is that we are the UNESCO Earthen Architecture Chair UK organism, which is sort of gratifying in one way, but also strange because mostly the UNESCO chair recognises universities, and we're not a university. We're just ahead of the earth building sort of game in that sense. So you've got Earth Building UK and Ireland, and we're Ibuki-gram, for those of you that do that kind of thing, and we're at UNESCO, and we do a whole lot of different things, all to do with earth building, and I'm going to sort of touch on some of those, and also on some of my own consulting work. So this is a bit of an odd place to start, okay, but I've just sort of realised quite just recently is that this is where my dad started his career, and that's him, and it's where I'm ending mine, which is kind of a funny thing. He came here in 1946. He was a school leaver, and so most of the people that he studied with had been in the war. They were all a bit older than him. And they had all kinds of mad ideas, like communism and Christianity and all kinds of stuff. And it was a very big sort of fertile moment to be an architect, because everything's been bombed flat. And so what are we going to do now? And all of these older guys have already thought through a lot of these things and what they want to do and how they want to, rebuild everything. And he's coming in as an 18-year-old. And one of the things that they said to him was, that they said generally was, we want to go on building sites. We want to understand what happens on building sites, because we don't think that we can be architects if we're not talking to builders. And so they said to the staff, can you get us onto building sites? And so I was brought up on this idea of my dad spending a week with the scaffolders and a week with the bricklayers and a week with the chippies. And unfortunately, or fortunately, for me, that just sounded like the most exciting bit of the whole thing. Right? So which is why I've ended up as a builder and not as an architect or a ballet dancer. And Dad had, from that moment, it kind of, lots of different things. So in 57, he and my mum bought a Land Rover, and they drove to Iran, and suddenly he's exposed to forms and shapes and cultures and materials that he's never seen. It's just kind of mind-blowing. The whole thing just blows the lid off, right? And again, we were sort of brought up with that sort of thing, and he was always somebody looking forward in kind of interesting ways. So the good-looking one is my brother, And he's holding open a Velux window. And this was the first Velux window that I'd ever seen. This is 1975. And it's the loft extension at our house near Ladbroke Grove. And behind that loft extension, on the other sort of behind us, down here somewhere, there's an air source heat pump. He's put an air source heat pump in 1975. And that's what heated the house and the hot water, right? Nobody had done that. And that's what he was kind of into. And what this photo doesn't show very well is this little thing here is a wind turbine. And so he's making electricity on the roof near Ladbroke Grove in 1975. And of course, things move on and everything moves on. And later on, he gets into all sorts of stuff like hydrogen and all of these things, which are this funny point where building design and energy meet. And there's this strange connection, disconnection. And somewhere along the line, a friend of his says, how do we build without cement? Because they want to build a new capital city of Tanzania at Dodoma. And I know that they can't afford the cement. So how are we going to do that? And so my dad comes back here and sort of dusts off his library card, and he finds this book from 1920 by a guy called Clough Williams Ellis, who's like one of the ancient of days. And he wrote this book about building with rammed earth and with cob and, and various things. And that's where the whole thing started. So if we just jump forward 10 years, okay, this is my first building. That's me. The hair's got shorter. Mm-hmm. And this was our first little rammed earth building in Freetown, Sierra Leone. And the point about this, it was funded by the Commonwealth, and the point about it was just to show that you could, metre for metre, you could make a building that was affordable. And I was 21, 22, and I made every possible mistake that I could make with a book from 1920 in a culture and a space that I really had no clue about what was going on. And I thought, well, that's quite interesting that that you could have so many things stacked up against it and still come out with some kind of result. There must be something in that. And so that's why I sort of stuck with what I'm doing. Now, one of the things you might sort of see from this is that it's a house, sort of, painted white, okay? Now, in the sort of subsequent sort of 40 years, the whole idea of building earth buildings and painting them white has sort of come into a slightly different thing. And people would say, well, why are you covering up the earth? But I would no more have built an earth-coloured earth building in Sierra Leone in 1985 than I would have done in Ladbroke Grove. It was just unthinkable, right? You cover up. And that only changed a few years later when I went and worked in Australia. And the Australians do this thing that they call rammed earth, but actually it's all stuck together with cement, which is a bit depressing. But their whole thing is that it's so expensive to build this stuff that's stuck together with cement that there's no way that they're going to cover any of it up. You might have a little line of tiles behind the kitchen sink. That's as much covering up as you're going to do, because you want every neighbour to know that you've got the bucks to do rammed earth, as they call it. And this changed, it's made a big change, it's made a big impact. And little things started happening in California and elsewhere. And I went back to Africa because the whole cement thing didn't suit me, and neither did the middle-of-the-road rock, really. So then, just a little divergence again. This is Hook Park, okay? This is a rammed earth building at Hook Park. Yeah, I'm getting some looks here. What? Hold on a minute. So before Hook Park belonged to the AA, it was a school designed to produce timber buildings from timber thinnings, okay? And the first group of intakes that came in, this guy here, Andy Simmons, was an architect, trained architect, and then he went to that school, And then he heard about me and got me down, and I did a little talk. And then I showed them how to put formwork together and how to build a little building. And then he's made these rather, sorry about the photography, but he made these rather elegant little timber thinning trusses, and he put them onto the rammed earth. And then inexplicably, the whole thing was knocked down, and I think it just was too earthy, and so on. And that's it's been a bit of a theme, because since that moment, nobody has stood in Hook Park and thought, I wonder what's down here that I'm aware of. No one's gone, oh, what's that? They've all gone, oh, look at this. And in the same way that I would kind of expect that you would not, walk into Hook Park and think, now where's the mahogany, right? By the same token, I would also expect you to look at what is at your feet and think, what can I do with that? Now, this material here, this rammed earth, did not come from that site, right? It was brought in because he wanted to do rammed earth, and we looked at the material there, and it was all rubbish for rammed earth. But we know that we could do many, many different things with it, right? Just not rammed earth, without really sort of standing on our heads and bringing all of this stuff from outside and all of this. See, so I'm just going to quickly, because normally my assumption is that there's very little knowledge in the room. Okay, there's very little knowledge in the room. There's actually probably a lot more knowledge in the room than it will admit to. So I'm just going to go quickly through some types of earth building, because it's a whole family, and it's not a dysfunctional family, right? They all get on really well together, and you can put them together in all sorts of really interesting ways. And particularly because you're architects, right? So you can just, you can make a plan for all of that. Did you get us a glass of water? So this is maths earth, and maths earth gets called lots of different things, but Ibuki, we're trying to give more kind of generic names, because I think one of the things that's really helped rammed earth in this country in the last couple of decades is that it had this more generic name, rammed earth. When I first started, it was called pisé de terre, because it had come from France, and everyone called it by this strange French name that put people off for a long time. So this is also known as cob, but it's also known as mud wall, or it's known as clay dabbins. It's got lots of different vernacular terms, and like all of the earth building technologies, it's a global thing. You'll find mass earth in Iraq and Afghanistan and China and Australia. It's a global thing. All of these things are really global, and they've all got these. So we're just trying to give them this rather generic name so that it's not. And so you've got this. So you've got mass earth. And then you've got framed earth, which in this country is called wattle and daub, or stick and rice, or mud and stud, or it's got lots of different names. Huh? And then you've got light earth, which is first cousin to framed earth, in that it's associated with timber frames, but it's filling in between those timber frames with a bio aggregate or a biofiber, like wheat straw or hemp. But in this case, it's glued together, bound together with clay. And that gives it all sorts of really interesting possibilities to do with the maintenance of air quality and other things. It's just too big a topic. Cheers, man. Thanks very much. So then you've got moulded and compressed earth brick and blocks, which is for a lot of people, that's what they would just immediately think about. Oh, yeah, mud bricks. Oh, Adobe, yeah. So in our sort of generic naming, moulding and compressed earth is... so that it started out as CEB, compressed earth block, and then we added moulded, which is done in a wetter state, which you might call Adobe block. And again, you'll find, versions of this all over the place. So this is at our our annual event called Clayfest. We've got a Clayfest happening on the 17th of this month. It's online this year. It'll be in the flesh again next year. This was Clayfest 2018, and someone just decided that they were going to run a workshop and build this kind of Eladio d'Este type structure with unfired clay blocks made in a factory in Buckinghamshire, where I spend 2 days a week, and put together with a clay mortar. And so these are items that you can buy, right? And we'll come back to that a little bit more. And then turf is the strange one of the bunch in my mind. Turf is something that's dug up and cut into shapes and shaped and laid in a way like stone. You can just see that there's a herringbone pattern there. And this is something that hasn't really been seen in this country since maybe the 1920s. This is the first new build, in at least 100 years. Because some of us got involved with people in Iceland who've still got quite a strong knowledge tradition, skills tradition of using turf. And then there's earth mortar, and everything gets put together with earth mortar. I showed you the MEBs and the CEBs, but this is quite a high status Georgian building. This is the mayor's house in a town called Malton. The whole of Malton is built out of stone with clay mortar. Okay, and clay mortars, you just find them everywhere, and they're very. So this is kind of 300 years old, and its geometry is maintained by the fact that it has a clay mortar. So whereas in the past I would have looked at that as a stone building and said, oh no, that's a stone building, it's nothing to do with us. Now it's it's ours. They use bigger aggregate, and they're sort of cut, but essentially what's holding that in place and position is the mortar. And then this is rammed earth. This is a job we did up in outside Durham. It's an office complex, and we don't need to talk about rammed earth too much. I mean, it's like had a lot of press, but it's not the answer to everything, because you don't always get the material at site and all of that. And then you've got the earth plasters, and these things are really, this is kind of where the industry is in a way, because I could plaster literally every surface in this room, including the glass, right? Clay will stick to anything, and it will do lots and lots of different things in that situation. It will manage the humidity in this room without having to turn a machine on or a machine off. It will sequester VOCs. It is fireproof. It does a lot of different things, working hard, okay? And in this case, it's the Apple store in Brussels, and it's all smooth and whatever. And why are they putting it in there? Why are they putting it in there? Because they know that people going into there will feel comfortable, and they will buy more phones. Simple, right? Very smooth and flat and all of that. And then you've got different color, different texture. Clay does all of this stuff. This is Nando's. Pretty much every Nando's in this country is clay plastered. Okay? So next time you're tempted by a bit of peri-peri chicken, right, know that the opportunity is there to see some clay plaster, different colors, bought commercially, applied by a practitioner, and so on. And again, they're putting it there because they want people to come in, feel comfortable, and buy more peri-peri chicken. It's really simple, and it's just like an instant thing, because the amount of M&E that you would need to manage the air quality to that level is just ridiculous. And actually, what you need to do is just put some clay on the wall, and it doesn't hold up the roof. There's no risk. Okay, so that's why the plasters are so popular. I wanted to say that somebody came on a workshop with me a few years ago, and he from UCL, and at a certain point he said, in more or less the same these ways, he said, why do you old people hold on to this information? Why do you not release it, okay? And the point of Ibuki is that we're trying to get it out there as hard as we possibly can. Go and look at ibuki.co, the website, and you'll find the link to the YouTube channel, which has got masses of how to do it and all sorts of stuff, and all of the talks from Clayfests going back, 5, 6 years, I can't think exactly. And we really are trying to reach out and push it out. It's not a closed shop, okay? It's an open house. So we're back to framed earth, and I wanted to show this because of that earlier image of the building at Hook, because really Hook is all about framed earth. I mean, it's not about rammed earth. I mean, it's been done. We've done it. Okay, but so this is framed earth, and they've put together you can see it's a very lightweight frame, and which they can flex. And then somebody's on a little mixer there, and he's making up some what we would call daubs, and then the team are setting to putting these around the nodes, and very rapidly, the whole thing becomes stiff. So you can see at the ends, they've just got these two little triangulation points at the ends, right? Everything else is kind of flowing in motion, but as soon as that clay starts going on, you can't move it. So we just did a little bit of work at Edinburgh 3 weeks ago or something, and we had them all doing little bits of framed earth. And some of them had made frames from tiny little sticks that they tied together with bits of cotton, and you just thought, oh, this is ridiculous, And then within about half an hour of them starting, you had all these really solid positions. And so I think my suspicion is that this is where this is Hook, and this is so now we've gone from what have I done? We've gone from kind of doing the nodes and daubing, where the material's wrapping around the framing, and in Europe, in England, quite often the framing is big, heavy oak frames with woven panels in them. In a lot of places, but you can see that this is a very, very lightweight thing, and in my mind's eye, this is something that you'd go to a now concrete office block that nobody wants to work in anymore, and this is how you would turn it into beautiful living spaces, right? With materials that will never run out, will never not be used again in the way that the concrete frame would, is instantly redundant. So we've gone from daubing, putting it around the frame, now to plastering. And then with some sgraffito, different color, and now suddenly you've got something which, for a lot of people, they'd look at that and they would just say, well, I just have no idea what that is, right? That it's sort of semi-bulletproof, soundproof, fireproof, some sticks and some clay. So I started with Ivan's group like an hour and a half ago, and I just said, this is the most plastic of all the plastic materials. This is the most plastic. It's extraordinary to me that we're standing here and, now, and we're not just kind of going mad for it, because you can just do so many things with it. So, on another, trajectory altogether, which is also sort of somewhat similar, this is a building site in Walthamstow, and I was brought in because they wanted to build rammed earth party walls. And one thing led to another, let's say, and I had them take all of the material to the brick factory and make it into blocks instead. But you can see this is just kind of urban site spoil. The whole thing had been a light industrial estate, and the developer, interestingly, was the one that said, "We will have no waste. This site will produce no waste." So instead of taking all of that stuff to landfill, a whole lot of it got made into blocks and brought back to site again. And by doing so, they spent a third of what they would have spent on landfill on making a usable building product. And that's where things become kind of interesting, because money makes the world go round. So this is the factory. This is a machine from 1923. It gets mended with a hammer, and it produces, a few thousand blocks a day with a bunch of guys. And they then make these blocks. This is Walthamstow waste that are on pallets, and they go back to site. And in this case, the site was a passive house development, multi-development. And so you can see a lot of timber, and there was obviously a lot of insulation. But that wouldn't actually meet Part O, except that the M&E guy had realized that he needed to put a load of mass in order to meet Part O. Even though Part O wasn't a thing at that point, he could see it coming. And so you can see the floor. This is like classic pot and beam, but the pots are all reclaimed concrete blocks from the demolition work. So they did a lot of work to really push the carbon down, and then it's a big timber structure and so on. But it's actually not going to work for Part O until you get this guy to come along and take the blocks and lay them into the walls. And suddenly now you've got a whole lot of mass, and that's dealing with a whole lot of different issues. Air quality, thermally, and so on. And this is the developer's picture sent out. You can go buy one. It's very expensive. Walthamstow Village, I like to say. And of course, the brick factory has got this machine from the 1920s. And they can make lots of different bricks in lots of different shapes. And they want you to know about it. So they built a nursery school next to the factory. And it was a dome designed by a guy called Gernot Minker. Any of you heard of Gernot Minker? He's a big guy for us. He's a really big guy. He's German professor, and he's really into domes and vaults and all of these kinds of materials. And I couldn't believe it that Jim had the front to go up to Gernot and say, design one for us, because I wouldn't. But Gernot said, yeah, good. And so it's the load-bearing central structure, and it's made from these funny-shaped bricks, and you can just do a lot with it, right? I mean, this is the most plastic material going. That's it. And then that led. Sorry, I've jumped in a little bit. The nursery didn't. The nursery kind of led to Walthamstow. Walthamstow led to King's Cross. So this is a bunch of Moldavian block makers, layers, coming to the factory and trying out the design detail, which is tying this back to a concrete basement wall with a whole lot of insulation and a couple of standard industry fittings. And honestly, the fuss that they made about laying concrete earth blocks, and then they turn up, and within about 15 minutes, the guy's just going, yeah, this is my job. This is what I do every day. And so then they just went back and put in, this is kind of 6 meters. It's not, they say it's non-load bearing, except that, it's very heavy, so it's holding itself up. And this is just the perimeter of a double basement, which is for commercial labs, the Tribeca site. And they've got this is part one, and then there's the part two and part three, and we're hoping to get a little bit more into the dividing walls and you know, a little bit more complexity and push them a little bit, because the first thing is that everyone's freaked out, you know, oh, you put clay bricks and what's going to happen, and then you satisfy all of those things, and they do it, and they realise actually there's a whole lot of clay that they haven't had to send to landfill, because again, this is the stuff that you were just using, huh? Mm-hmm. This is King's Cross. So, what is holding us? What's the constraint? This is a group of teaching staff, trainers at UCL Bartlett that we had into a workshop at Here East for 3 days, because it's our belief that that if you come in and teach a group of learners and then they turn to their teaching staff and say, what about this? And the teaching staff say, we don't really know, then it's much more difficult to make the thing move. And so within 6 months of doing this, and all of these, some of the group from this morning will recognize some of this already, plastic, viscous, humid, these different states of material. Once they start to come to grips with that, then they can do all sorts of funny things, and they can begin to understand what's going on. So this is day 3, and so we just do more and more and more of this stuff. This is a group of learners who happen to be practicing architects. Nikolai Shabazov was a student here, and then he works at Bennett's, and he was the one that got us into the King's Cross development, and we took him to France for a bit of training. And all of these things, there's a sort of repetition to all of what I show when I'm getting into the training, that you're grouping things together. But it's only by doing that sort of thing that you can put a 3-story rammed earth structure up in the middle of Lyon. Okay, people need to see the evidence of it. You need to be able to show the evidence of it. You can wait until the whole technical world has caught up with your idea, and the engineer and the surveyor and everyone's caught up, and the testing labs, the commercial testing labs, they've all caught up with you, right? Or you can just get ahead and do it, right? And figure stuff out, which is essentially what I've done, but not as an architect. I've just done it as a builder, and just tried to convey that as a possibility to designers. And it's not always the architect that comes to me. And this is the same story wherever. We have Ibuki has a connection with Zimbabwe, because I have a connection with Zimbabwe. So I hold the UNESCO chair on earthen architecture because of the work I did on standards for earth building in Zimbabwe and in Africa more widely. So there's a sort of, and so this is a group of trainers at the National University, and they're just doing exactly the same stuff that we're doing with the UCL lot down the road. This is a bit of a slightly controversial slide. I've got one more after this. These buildings are rammed earth. You can tell they're rammed earth because they're painted white, and they're in Zimbabwe. And on the right-hand side, you've got Queen's Park West and Queen's Park East, 2 sort of reasonable-sized suburbs of Bulawayo, the second city, and they're all made out of rammed earth. And they were built from the 40s into the 50s. Okay? We know, and they're really nothing special, believe me. But I mean, I'd rather be in one of these than in a concrete box when it gets hot and when it gets cold. So we can think about this systematically. We've thought about this systematically. I could show you similar kind of road layouts in Iraq 7,000 years ago that they were building with what? With molded earth blocks and running water down the street and sewage, All of this stuff is not complicated, but it just requires a certain application. Oh, I thought I had one more. Ah, there you are. Magic. So this is. You've all been to the Centre for Alternative Technology? No? Yeah? Yeah? So the Centre for Alternative Technology, if you've never been there, you really need to go there because they've just got masses of buildings made out of strange things in various states of repair. This is the lecture theatre that we were involved in building 15 years ago or so. Have a look. So, just to quickly say it, I've got 3 tables there that describe Earth as a material to build with. And there's no expectation that any of you would stay and watch while I show those 3 tables. It's now 3:45, so I could take some questions and then you can just slip away and whatever, or you can stay. It's fine.
Thanks for that. So you used the phrase, you said it's the most plastic material. You used that phrase twice. And I was kind of curious what you mean by that and what that means for design.
So what we did with Ivan's group was that I presented them with some buckets of powdered clay and some sand, and I invited them to add a certain amount of water to little piles of material that they had mixed, different amounts of sand, different amounts of clay, and then the same amount of water through. And what they got was a series of piles, some of which they could mould vertically upwards, some of which were sort of on the brink of flowing off the table. They're all usable states. They're all usable states. Maybe not the 10 mil is still a bit too dry. But the next one, you're heading into rammed earth country. And then the next one along, maybe we're thinking about mass earth. And the next one along, maybe we're thinking about a molded earth brick. And then the one that's just about to flow off the table, now we're going to think about adding fibers to that. And we're making just so much kind of three-dimensional stuff. But it starts out as a bucket of powder, and you're turning it into this plastic material that is just so manipulable, if that's a word, and you can see it because we have these traditions around the world where people have done, so many different things, and they're none of, which are not to do with a hard chemical set. They're to do with a plastic material which you take to a certain point and you dry and you place, and then if you look after it, it's there 300, 400, 500, 600 years later. That's what I mean by plastic. And I suppose of course you can twist and bend wood, right? And the thinner you make it, the easier it is to twist and bend. But I wouldn't. It would be hard for me to think of it as a plastic material per se. So then obviously you've got plastic. Is a plastic material. You can mold it. You can do this, all this stuff. But for a lot of the plastic stuff, it's what's involved is heat, either to get it into that state or to change it into some other state. Whereas this is not. This is about adding water. So it's a very user-friendly kind of medium. You can take it into a plastic state, you can take it out of a plastic state. You can take it back into a plastic state, you can take it out of a plastic state. There's no end to it. You just add water to it, you dry it out. You add water to it, you dry it out. Yeah?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. I know 45 minutes is quite a short time to explain what I'm about to ask, but
Okay.
I'm quite curious about how does the invention process work? Is it more towards working with the scientists, or is it more learning from the locals and how things have been done throughout the years, centuries, or a mixture of both. It's quite interesting what you're explaining, because you're basically saying we're inventing new building technologies.
No. We're not inventing anything. Everything has been done. But I do also think that you lot can turn it into different shapes and forms and step away from a rather stale discussion about what is modern and what is classical and all of this kind of nonsense, and just, use the materials for what they are useful for. And that's by chatting to the scientists and looking at local practice. But it does also, and then you've got the whole culture thing. Are we in a courtyard culture? Are we in a street culture? Are we in a rural or an urban? Or, all of these things has their thing. And are we in a place that it just rains the whole time and we have to think about what are we doing now? And, so I think it's, you can't come back. There's another one. Is that, yeah? Yeah, so Cobauge, it's a whole big project that we've been partners in, where we're melding together mass Earth and light Earth. So that's kind of an unusual thing, because light Earth, as I say, is normally associated with timber structures, but we've put it together with mass Earth. There are so many little films on the YouTube channel. I really ask you kindly to subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Yeah, and then you can go and just have a look at a little bit of test. How do you do this test? 2 minutes. And then you can just go away and do a little test like that with some beautiful stuff from Hook Park or a building site that you're visiting, or in your back garden or whatever. And then if you're not quite sure that you got it right, you just go back and look again. It's 2 minutes. All right?
That was brilliant, thank you. I've just given you a follow on Insta, which I'm sure everyone in the room will do as well.
Thank you very much.
I had a question about the Walthamstow landfill bricks, which sound amazing. Is there a kind of limit to what you can recycle from the site, though? I guess there's issues with toxic materials that you can't put in. I wonder if you can say a bit more about those bricks.
So there was a lot of crushed concrete and crushed brick, which can recycle in different ways. So a lot of that went under the foundation. So there was a lot less foundation as a result of using that stuff. And then there was the mixed material where you've got a lot of clay in it. And actually the whole process of that. So the first thing was that they had to produce a certificate that said there was nothing nasty in it. Okay, the factory wouldn't accept it if it had asbestos. It's easy. Huh? So then the factory got it, but the factory is used to using clay and sand because it's got a lot of clay and sometimes it adds sand. And suddenly all of this stuff's coming and it's got bits of concrete, bits of metal and bits of all of this stuff. And we really struggled to make it work because what we had to do was to get it dry, then sieve it, then make it wet again, which is like a real headache of a thing. So having done that once, Jim, who runs the factory, went down the road to the last brick factory that went out of business. His is the last one now in that area. But the last one went out of business. They closed shop 5-6 years ago. And he knew that they had a machine. And he said, can I buy that machine off you? So the block maker is 1923 and the wet pan is 1956. So all of this stuff is not like high-tech gear, but it just means that you can put wet stuff straight into the wet pan, squish it up with some water, small enough you can squish it that it'll go through the block making process. And then there's this whole discussion about what the architect wants you to do and what the engineer will allow you and all of those normal things. But we're in that sort of slightly odd situation that we're repurposing materials that we're finding at site rather than any of this having an EN code and all of that. And so then you get into this thing, well, how much testing do you want? And of course you can do all of the tests, but if you test to British standards, in some test places, they'll say, you know, this is the crushing strength, but then they'll put a stamp on it that says, like, deviant. They have to work, you know, because it's not a fired brick. It's not a concrete block. It's performed in this way, but it's deviant. Okay, I'm in the deviant world. And it's so many things that needs doing and changing within the structure of everything in order for it just to become like, okay, so we understand it's not fired and we have to design as such, but yeah. Okay?
Brilliant. Is that H.G. Matthews?
H.G., yeah.
Cool, thank you.
All right.
I guess I'm kind of interested in the scale of the application of this, because, you know, visually where it can make a real impact is on, you know, monuments and government buildings and skyscrapers. And how much of a substitute can you use it for, you know, really heavyweight materials? And the lifespan of it as well. You know, these buildings have to stand as testaments to the things they're embodying for a long time. And that's an important factor.
I also kind of have the same question, like the scalability also, if these materials can be used for plant forms and complex geometries. So what do you think about it, and should the conversation be in this direction more? As you have said, like these things have been there for quite a while, but what's next?
You're supposed to ask a question, right? And you've given me a bit of more like a shopping list. It's a bit difficult, but so I'll attempt. So my work, so a lot of this stuff I think is about strategy. My dad had strategy. He could see things coming. He could see them coming, and then he would make strategy to address those things that were coming. And that's probably the biggest thing that I got from him, was to think about what is the strategy. So I worked in Australia for a year, and they were doing all of this rammed concrete, and all of the clients were millionaires, essentially. And what happens when you build millionaire housing is that it drives the cost of whatever you happen to be doing up, okay? Because it does, okay? And then it's part of a millionaire's house, and then no one gets to see it. Maybe Homes and Gardens, right, will come in and do a photo shoot with, you know, the happy, you know, couple and so on, so on. But essentially, it's a bit of a cul-de-sac. Okay, so when I came back, when I went back to Africa, we're talking about different things. I'm more interested in schools and classrooms, because if you come from a rural settlement where cement is not the common material, and the first government building that you interact with is a school, and it's made out of concrete, there's a very strong message. So for me, that was a big part of the work on standards and so on, was to make something that you could standardize, that you could essentially meet government regulation. And then when I came back here, the thing that brought me back here was the Eden Project. It was a big public building, right? And then subsequently, a lot of the work that I've done has been public buildings, because public buildings are public, and you don't have to pay to buy them, right, to experience them. You can just go in, use them, go out again. Didn't like that, liked that, that was okay, whatever, okay? So for me, the part of the question that you're both asking is how to shift what the perceptions are. And one of the things about public buildings is that you feel confident that some big client with some fancy architect and all of that has has put money into this, then it gives you a sort of sense of confidence, right? But so there's, as I say, there's quite a lot wrapped up in all of that. I'm not building high towers. Normally, I would show a little picture of a couple of 6- and 7-story buildings in France and Germany, but I just didn't have time today. But this is not about high buildings, but you know, most buildings around the world, you know, 2-story or 3-story. That's not really the problem. And there's something else as well. The first buildings that we built were all painted white. Then we decided we'd paint nothing and we'd show there's the earth, right? But then at some point I lost that romantic impulse, okay, and replaced it with a different kind of romantic impulse, which was to say, I know it's earth, but you think it's painted blue, okay, and that's fine. It's absolutely fine. If you want to paint it blue, you paint it blue. It's your democratic right not to have to look at an earthen colour, right? Fine, no problem at all.
So it's kind of what you're saying, you know, like your dad, it's up to us to then start to bring these to the things that it hasn't been brought to yet. And if one of those things is things of a very substantial scale, that's, well, you know, our prerogative.
If not you,
yeah.
If not us, here we are, ready to go. Okay, so I'm gonna, if you all want to stand up and leave, the people that want to stand up and leave, and then I'll just see who's remaining, and then I'll start with that, okay? This was developed by the French group Crater, who were part of the architecture school of Grenoble. And this is their pedagogical opener, right? This is just like where they start to have a conversation. And I saw this 10 years ago. I'd already been like 30 years in the game, and I saw this and I just thought, but it's really unfair, you know, that you have to wait 30 years of farting around with these different things, and someone just comes and goes, it's like this, and it's like this, and it's like this. I would just ask you that you, please to humour me, and I'm going to ask you really stupid questions, and you just have to answer. It doesn't make you stupid answering my stupid questions, it just means that you're polite, okay? So this is... what is Earth? So we've got 3 tables here, and they go from this table here, which is about a lot of most words sort of in English are shorter than their French counterparts, but in this case, the French is shorter, okay, and the French is grain, for granular, okay? And granular material, what is granular material? It's something that we play around with and we think about in all sorts of different ways, and we exploit it in all sorts of different ways. And but sometimes people look at this with a certain amount of horror that I've just made this terrible mess on this beautiful black background, okay? But it doesn't... So we're going to tidy up the mess in our minds, okay? Just by starting off by sort of just naming the parts, okay? So what have we got here? You just call it out. I know it's a stupid question. Stone, okay. And then, so I'm going to say pebbles. Okay. Yeah. No, it's just because this is French. You're going to get a bit of difference. And what else have you got in here? Huh? So yes, soil is it's earth. It's tricky though. Well, the thing is that soil gets muddled up with topsoil, and that's the farmer's stuff. That's the top layer that's got organics in it. And it's true that that is what turf building is all based on, but most of all other earth building is from below that layer.
Pebbles, not also work.
So what else is in here?
Sand.
Sand, right. Right, okay. Right. Clay.
What's the difference between earth and clay?
This is why we have to. This is why we have to name the parts. Okay. We had a conversation about mud earlier on. Okay. What is mud? Don't really know what mud is. What has mud got in it, apart from water, and how much water? Right. So this is the whole point of starting to cut things up and divide them and dissect them and pull them apart. So. So we've got, give us another couple of things that could be in here.
Water.
Oh.
Clay.
Clay we got.
Rocks.
Sand.
Gravels. Okay. So there's lots of different names that we've got, and a lot of them over. You said stones initially, and I haven't got a thing that says stones, right? But pebbles does, gravel could too. There's lots of overlapping, and we haven't got an industry that is sufficiently sophisticated to have really named all of these things. So if I call a quarry and I say I want some X, then they'll say, well, so with rammed earth, then I'd be asking them for gravels from 20 millimeters down to dust, right? And then they'd say, oh, you mean crusher run? Right? And so they have different names for everything, and it's confusing. And the more you can understand it, the more you can kind of find yourself in the place where you need to be. Anything else?
Dust.
Yeah, I haven't got a thing for dust, though.
So,
Yeah, let's have a look.
organic material?
So there's no organics.
Chalk.
And there's no chalk, and that's a cheeky one, okay? Because chalk is... It's another whole discussion. You'll have to come back. I'll come back and talk to you about chalk, because it's like a really interesting thing. But yeah,
Chalk's different from a rock.
chalk is a lot of dead things, and a stone is a stone, right? So they're different. Okay, what's between all of these particles? Thank you. And we're going to come back to air and water on our next table. Today, at the moment, we're just doing granular, okay? So when you put these together as a thing, right, is this a processed material? No. So we could call it a natural raw material, okay? It's just different ways of getting to grips with this horrible pile that's messing up the table, yeah? And we know that we can build elements from it, yeah? So we could call it building material. But it's granular. I poured it out. That was the first thing that I did. And I'm going to keep coming back to it, because granular material can make objects, and it can make buildings. Okay? So now we're going to go on from this horrible this horrible melange of materials, and think about them in their separate states. Okay, so now you guys you've picked the right space to be. So somebody can just come up, okay, and just touch that with their eyes shut and just call out what it is that they feel. You have to humour me and don't worry about them, because I'm not worrying about them. No, he's the stand-up. Come on. You've got to get used to this.
I
Okay.
close my eyes.
So start on that one.
It's it's a hard stone, but it feels soft, like chalky on the outside.
Yeah. You could pick the whole thing up and have a little sniff of it. Can you
Okay.
smell anything?
Not really, kind of earthy, but not very smelly.
No. And so the next one.
This is like granular, smaller pieces of stone, maybe like 3-4 centimeters in diameter.
Adjectives?
Adjectives. Hard. Like sharp.
Sharp. Right. Okay. Go on. Next
yeah.
one.
This is a sand. It's soft. It's very thin and very it's smooth. And the last one is like a doughy powder. Wow. It feels
Wow.
like flour.
Wow. Did you hear the wow? It's got the wow factor. None of the others can do that. Right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the thing is that we can put these through a sieve and we can put them into their separate categories, and we can name them. Okay, we can name them, and we can give them a size that they conform to. Right? It's not so easy when you're digging up a piece of ground at Hook, right? Figuring out how much clay is there, it's not so easy. It's one of those little cheeky little complicated things. Sand, and my last one was stolen, so I've got no label for it. Apologies. Okay, so we have these granular materials, we can separate them out, we can put them back together, we can put them back together at different percentages, okay? We can put more clay or less, we can put less sand or more, and these will change the properties of the material. But if you start putting these into a plaster, then you're an experimental artist, okay? And if you don't have these or these, then you're going to struggle to do rammed earth, okay? So all of these things they fit into their niche. And they're granular materials, and granular materials has all of these properties which we can just think about again a little bit more. So this is just sand, and this is water. Okay. So as I pour, can you tell me what is similar and what is different?
Flow.
They flow. Granular material flows. Anything else?
Takes the shape of the cup.
It takes the shape of the vessel.
And both have like drops.
Both have
Drops. So the sand.
sand drops. Nice. Yeah? It's funny how different. Like I would never think of sand as being a drop, but of course it is a drop, and it flows one over the other. Yeah. And so these are things that we're exploiting. This granularity. It's why we have a whole table about it, because it's a really important thing, although it sounds really banal. Okay. And the thing is that it does it over and over and over and over again. So we have our liquids and we have our sand drops, and we can move them from one shape and vessel to another over and over and over again. There's no end to this, okay? So then the only point where we have to say there's a difference is in the loading. But things that you can do with liquids are things that you can do with granular materials, and things that you can do with granular are things you can do with liquids. And this is something that you really need to think about. This is something that we just touched on with the group before this, that we're playing around with the amount of liquid and the amount of granular material and what it will do in these different states. Okay, so this is granular material. I'm going to keep referring back to this as I go along, but now I'm going to come to air and water. It's all right, I've got this. Honestly, no. So this is about air and water. And again, I'm just going to ask you like really banal, stupid questions. And we're going to start with air. And so I've got these two vessels here. And I have sand and I have gravel, okay? So I'm going to put the sand in one and the gravel in the other. And as I'm just doing that, just going to ask you just to consider for a moment what 1 and 1 might add up to. You just call it out once you've figured it out.
2.
Ah, thank you. That's good. This is a commonly held belief. And so we've got our two vessels here. Okay, so I've got my sand and my gravel, and I've got 2. So then I'm going to take this bowl, and I'm going to put the sand in, and then I'm going to put the gravel in. And then, now this is a ladle, okay? But in your mind's eye, you might also see it as a shovel. Okay. But then if you were really imaginative, you might see this as a 6-ton front-end loader. It's the same thing. It's doing the same thing. It's dealing with granular material at this level or the next, okay? So all of this stuff is about scale and scalability. So now I'm just going to take my 6-ton shovel and put these back together. And some people, we've got 4 sets, Ibuki has 4 sets of this, and the French team that developed it came over and trained us on how to take it out of the boxes, I've got 3 boxes, how to set it up on the tables, how to deliver it, and how to put it away again. Mike's not hearing. I was sort of saying to Mike, I'm sorry, it has to go back in a certain kind of way. That's just how it is. And the French were very insistent about it. So, one has to pay attention. So, so here's my second bowl. And I'm just going to pour that last little bit. And so what happened to our 1 and 1? It's less than 2.
So 1 and 1 to start with.
So what's happened here?
You've got rid of the air.
You've got rid of the air. This is the air and water table. So if you answer water or air at any time, you've got 50-50 on getting that right. Yeah, you've got rid of the air. And so what's happened? If you've got rid of the air, what's happened to that material? It's denser. Okay, and density and strength are linked. Okay, so we have these granular materials, and the way that we put them together, we can make them more or less dense. And this is really important for lots and lots of different processes that we're involved in. Think about the types, the mass earth, the framed earth, the light earth, the rammed earth, the clay mortars. Each of them has their own kind of nice niche for density and strength, which is completely undefined, okay? And that you'll go back to wherever and find some material and go, yeah, but look, this really works well. Doesn't conform to what you're saying at all. And this is one of the interesting things about this stuff, is that it doesn't conform to lots of things. It's a material, it's a natural material that we found is a natural material, and so it will have different characteristics, because it might be chalk, right? Okay, so then there's just another nice little way of sort of thinking about this and showing this is I'll just sieve this back out again. And just going back to thinking about the way that we can exploit this granularity in these materials. So I'm just going to put the pebbles back in. And then you can get this rather sort of satisfying effect. Now this is your sand drops, okay? This is water. This is what water does. It just finds its way in between every particle, even though it's the same size as your blood corpuscle, right? That's the clay. But the water can just find its way through. And in this case, the sand drops can also find their way through. There's a lot of things to exploit that we haven't really exploited, I think. So and then we're going to we've done a little bit of air and density and that kind of stuff. And so now we're going to move on to water. And we're going to talk about capillary bridges. So the first three containers, stones, the gravels, and the sands, if you look at them under a microscope, they all look pretty much the same. They're a kind of random shape. In this case, which I'm representing with two spheres, okay? All this funny surface area. And what water does with its capillary action is that it can fill that gap. And this is the thing that we can exploit quite a lot. So I've got my little capillary bridge here, and I'm going to show it with these ping pong balls. They're dry, okay? So they just move randomly. And when I put a little bit of water on them, then that capillary action holds them together. Just a little bit, but it's very fast. It's instant, okay? And the more water you add, different things happen. Now, at this point, you're still a little bit too big a group. And at this point, I would normally ask a few of you to come up and have a little play with that capillary action here. But you can sort of, can you see it there?
Maybe if you use the other hand.
So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to put them in there. There's a little bit of water, but they're moving around in a sort of somewhat chaotic way, okay? And then the more I add water to them, the more that they'll find each other. Where's that camera? Yeah, but and they'll start to clump together, and the water organizes them. And you start to get these geometries. And then at a certain point, you add too much water, and all of that just explodes and disappears. And so we can see that the amount of water and the way that we manage it does lots of different things, changes the states of things. And sometimes we want that disorganization because we need to add a load of other stuff in, like fibers, which are going to suck that water up, okay? And the only way to get them in is in this chaotic state. And in other situations, we've gone too far. Now we have to stop and wait and let it all dry out. Okay, we have to keep moving. So the thing is that the difference between these shapes, sort of chaotic shapes, and the clay is that the clay has got these plate shapes. They're flat, okay? And in and of themselves, they won't do anything in the same way that he touched the clay in the little thing there, and it was just like he said flour. He didn't say bread, he said flour, right? But with a little bit of water and a little bit of pressure, suddenly that capillary action does something, okay? And you can stack these together, and And so, you know, with a smaller group, I'll just get you up and we have a little competition about who can stack up and hold more, okay? But it's this connection between the capillary bridge of the water and then its ability to make these structures with the flat clay particles, and then their ability to bridge across these chaotic shapes. This is where it all comes together. So I'm just going to show you one more little thing, which you've probably seen before, but anyway, it's just a kind of little fun little thing. So this is just sand. This is quite a fine sand, and when I just let it flow, it's doing what that pile did. It's what granular materials do. It just makes its own shape, and it's happy with its own shape, and all of that. And so, but then when you add water to it, something else happens. And again, we're in kind of capillary bridge area here, because it's just because what's happening is that as the sand particles are hitting the water, they're just creating little bridges instantly. Except when they stop running. And so we have this combination of, we've got this combination of particle sizes and moisture. It's another little demonstration of how fast you can change what a material can do. And let's give it one more little go. And of course, once the water runs out, then it's just sand, right? Okay, last table, because I've got to get out of here. All right, so this is about force now. So we've had the granular material, and it has all of these properties. And then we've got air and water, and the different sort of actions and responses. You just bring your chairs around if you want, it's fine. And then this last table here is about forces, because whatever we do, if we're plastering a wall, we're applying force. If we're ramming earth, we're applying force. If we're putting it in a block in the machine to make a molded earth brick, we're applying force. So we're just going to have a little bit of a think about force. And the place that we're going to start is back to, so I've got a void and I have a form, and I've put the one in the other, and then I'm just going to add sand to my void. I'm just going to fill up. This is just sand. There's nothing in it, except that we had a bit of a discussion earlier on about what was in that pile, and the hardest one to get to was, of course, the air. Yes, there is air, and the French named this one the sword in the stone. So so you just keep your eye on this top up here, and so then I'm just going to apply a little bit of force here, and you can see that those particles are getting closer together. You've got an increase in density, okay? So then somebody has to pull the sword out. You see, this is the kingship of the realm, if you so manage. Well, I mean, we'll have to look at the fine print on that one, but you know.
Wow.
So you can put it on the floor and just, but don't wiggle it, but just pull. Put your feet on it. Don't break my mold, please. There, okay. So, thank you very much. Round of applause. I think we've got to tighten the entry requirement now, because obviously too easy. So I'm just going to do the same thing. So you can see it's just sand because I just poured it in, and then he's pulled the thing out, and then I've just poured it out again. Now I'm going to pour it back in again. There's nothing, there's nothing particularly special here. But now I'm filling this back up again. And now I'm going to apply a little bit more force and a little bit more systematically. And say, when the French came and showed us how to show this and all of this, now everyone that was shown all that, they all do this completely differently. So some people will get the audience to come up and do this, right? And Dan at Bath is he's a postdoctoral engineer, and they'll have discussions about alumina and silica in the clay particles. But I can show this to a primary school group, and they will all understand what it is that I'm saying. Pretty much, they'll pretty much get it. Okay, so we need somebody else now to have a little go and see if you can get it out. Ivan, yeah.
Oh, surprise.
Anyway.
It's quite amazing.
So what is...
It's like uncanny there.
So you've all done a bit of structures and so on. So what's happening? Can you describe what's happening? Friction. There's friction. Yeah, there's friction. So what is the action of the friction? Shear. Okay, you've got shear strength.
You have compression
Where's the compression?
between the walls of the container and the piece stored inside it.
And so what is the action of that compression? Because I can just pour it straight out. There's no binder as such. So what's the effect? Why is that compression? Why is it holding it?
It's less air gap. It's creating a kind of vacuum.
A vacuum. Is that a vacuum?
Vacuum.
No. It's tricky, isn't it? Because you know what's going on, but putting it into words is quite difficult. Something that's happening is that you're adding force. I've added force, and now you're adding force. So your force is getting added to my force. Okay, and your force is dynamic because you're pulling on something. I've added my force, I've walked away. Done. Okay? Okay, so there's another way of looking at this. So I'm just going to put my sand back in, and then I need an assistant for this next thing because the camera is not going to pick up the... I need somebody to read the numbers off for the... So what I'm going to do, right, is I'm going to take this away from here. I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to put that on there, and I'm going to switch it on, and I need someone just to confirm that says 0.
0.
Okay, so then I need you to, someone, as I add the sand in, I'm going to put 1,000 in, and I need you just to call out the hundreds as I go.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,057.
Oh. Where's a nice loading shovel when you need it? God, I've got to go down a bit more.
8, 6, 2, 999. Yeah, 1,000.
Okay, so we've got a kilo of sand in there. And so what I'm going to do now is just take that off there and turn this off, put that on, turn that on, and you can confirm it's zeroed.
Zero.
Okay, so now I'm going to put my little frame over the top, and this is held. It can't fall below that. So when I put this on there, you can confirm it's still zero.
Zero.
Yeah. So I've got 1,000 units. You counted off the hundreds as we went. You can do it again, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go.
1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 4, 1, 5.
It's tough when you get a dull child that can't understand when 1,000 is 1,000. Sorry, Alan. So, think about what's happening here. So, with this one, you've got these two forces, the one that I've applied and the one that Ivan's applied, okay? With this one, you've just got the material itself in the void. So what's happening? You have the tube. You've got the tube.
The pressure, it's different.
We're down to 299,300 now. It's a kind of a weird, it's kind of
Down.
right?
It's got lighter.
Right?
Oh my god.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So it's compact, it's slowly compressing itself, and as it compresses, it has less load going down at the bottom.
There's a lot of things.
More friction.
Well, we're back to friction again and force. All these different things are going on. But essentially, this is sand photographed in Polaroid light and under pressure. And what it shows you is the lines of force. The lines of force don't run down. It's not like that. They run in all these different. And so when you're trying to pull this out, all of these lines of force are being pulled up onto the wall. Here, all of the lines of force are with the gravity working on them, going down in different directions. So I said to you, granular material is very interesting material. It does all sorts of things that you have to think about. What's going on here? How does that work? Okay? And so the simplest way I can describe it is that you've got a series of arches in here, and you've got 1,000 little keystones holding each of these little arches so that the load doesn't transfer down. And what this tells us is that if you're doing rammed earth, you cannot do a rammed earth layer like this, because as you ram up here, all of that force will transfer sideways and it will never reach the bottom. And this is true of lots of other earth building things, is that you need to have that force applied there, not somewhere else. So they're kind of interesting things to be able to think through. Okay, I've got one more little thing to do. 20 minutes, guys. So, it was still 1,000. Oh, thank goodness for that. That would be a really fantastic demo. No, it's not actually not 1,000. Okay, so I've got this. This is the hardest one to do in a way, because so I've got three things. Okay, now where's the likely lady? So this one I'm going to just put in sand. And this one, I'm going to put in a damp sand, but I'm going to apply some force. fail at doing this. She'd have you doing this, but no time. A little bit more in. So a little bit of force. And and then this one we're going to do exactly the same, except that I'm going to pay a little bit more attention and put a little bit more force. I'm going to put a little bit less in each time. Just spend a little bit more time giving it that compaction. So I was the round earth guy. I did a lot of round earth. And then little by little, I've sort of stepped away from it because it's sort of become a bit of a victim of its own success. So people send me emails now saying, I want to do a round earth project. I say, well, what material have you got? I've no idea. And so this is the thing that we need to start thinking about. What have I got? What have I actually got? I'm in a pine wood. Have I got oaks? No. Use pine. So if you're using pine, then you're doing different things than if you're using oak, because they have different density and strength, all these things, right? So the whole round earth thing is very interesting. Like all of the other earth stuff, it's very, very interesting, but it is not the case that it's it and there isn't anything else. By no means.
Is there always a way to build with earth? Doesn't matter what the conditions are.
If there's
if I came to you and said I want to build with earth,
right,
can you 100% say yeah, sure?
So, for instance, they go out west and they get to Nebraska, and they're on hundreds and hundreds of miles of silt.
Yeah.
There's not a drop of clay anywhere. Okay, so what they do is they cut turf, and they make turf buildings. So does that count? And then in North India, as you get up into the mountains, they've got a lot of round earth because basically what they've got is rubbish. Okay, it's like stony and sand, there's a little bit of clay and whatever. But you go down to I know nothing about India. Okay, I've never been, but anyway, I'm told that you go down to Gujarat and there's these great sort of plains, and it's all like silt and clay, and you can make blocks, but you can't now go. If you now went up to the Himalayas to do that, you'd have to sieve away, 90% of your mix in order to be able to make a clay block. So it's so much is depending on what you're fixed on doing. Okay, so this is a betting game, right? What happens when I lift that cup?
It's a slump.
Slump. Okay? I'm going to test your theory. Okay, it's done exactly what that did. It did exactly what that did until we added some water. Perfect. Will it take a load? Of course it will take an enormous load. That's what we do all the time. But below ground. Okay, this one. What's going to happen with this one?
Partly stay, partly it will stay in the shape and partly it will drop down just like that.
Okay.
Nice.
Load. These are a kilo each, so you've got to stake your claim. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. None. 2. 3.
No, because he's got 3 left on that.
I know.
So, the only thing that's acting here is capillary bridges. Okay, it's this instantaneous response to the water. That's it. Let's see if we can get one on it. It's a really stressful job, this, I tell you. It really is. Okay, so it's taken one, and you said two, didn't you? Yeah, okay. And you said three. Whoa. And so the interesting thing about this is that I have this thing full of, it's got water and sand, and it's got a little thing that closes. I had a little bit more water because you think, well, it's probably going to have lost a little bit of water and so on. So the last time I showed this, it went to 2, now we're at 3. And 4 is our failure. Okay? So we're feeling good about this, no? But if it fails at 4, what are we going to say? I don't know. And the big one. That's capillary bridges. They're really powerful things. They allow you to do so many things. We're back to this question about plasticity. Okay, so I've got one more thing. This is in the best tradition of children's TV. Is the one that I made earlier. It's the same sand. It's a slightly different form, slightly bigger form. Okay? And what we're going to do is just to put it down here, and then I need somebody to put the ball of their foot on there, and then just lift the other leg away.
I'll go first. So ball of my foot, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna just put it on sleep. That's about
The other one, yeah.
Okay. Ball of my foot.
Yeah. And then you just lift your weight off. Whoa. Now it's safe to assume, I think, that you're more than 5 kilos.
Yeah.
And so we've exceeded our expectations. Yeah? Okay. Somebody else? Anybody else?
It's not that hard.
Feel that they have the gravitational heft to...
Mike.
Yeah, Mike, actually.
I'm a lot more than 5 kilos. A lot more.
And yet...
95 kilos.
Wow. So what's going on?
Mike's really strong. There's something inside there. I can't quite believe it.
There is something inside there. It's a terrible, terrible cheat, but one that we use quite a lot in different ways. And what's in there are little fibre mats. And so what's happening is that this slump, okay, is contained within each layer. It wants to slump on this outside edge, but that's as far as it can go. And the capillary bridges are sufficiently strong to stop it from failing on the edge.
It's a question about water. I mean, there's no form of like wet architecture. What happens when this dries? Am I wrong?
So this is the thing, right? Is that on air and water, we get into this discussion about clay and what's happening with the clay. That you've got these capillary bridges with water, and now you've got these capillary bridges with clay. And what happens when the water leaves? It actually never completely leaves, because there's always like 3% sort of fixed water. But so it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting. Now, Mike is he's just, so can I just get a hand and we just need to lift these 3 tables up and into the hall there, and then you can get on with the rest of your life.
Thank you
very
Rowland.
much. Thank you so much.